Greetings, my dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. Today, we'll take a journey into the very heart of the wizarding world. Not through its great battles or darkest mysteries, but into a story full of laughter and chaos. No, I'm not talking about the time I had to clear the garden of Pentagon Manor from those dreadful giggling gnomes. I'm talking about the Weasley family. Not just a charming, red-haired and quintessentially Gryffindor family, but also a symbol of resilience, unity, and courage. One of the Sacred 28, the Weasley family boasts an ancient tradition, starting with Matilda, once a distinguished Transfiguration teacher and deputy headmistress at Hogwarts, all the way to Geneva Weasley, star player for the Holyhead Harpies. So, prepare your flute powder because today we're heading to the Burrow. Amidst enchanted pots, restless owls, and the irresistible aroma of rhubarb pie. But before we begin, I can't help but ask, who's your favourite Weasley and why? I'm curious, let me know in the comments.
Just beyond the quiet village of Ottery St. Catchpole, where wizards have lived discreetly beside their muggle neighbours since the Statute of Secrecy, stands a house unlike any other. Crooked, patched, and clearly held together by magic, the Burrow is the warm heart of one of Britain's most beloved wizarding families, the Weasleys. The Weasley name is steeped in magical tradition, a pure blood lineage with roots reaching deep into the soil of wizarding history. They are, by blood at least, among the old wizarding families. Yet, their place within the wizarding world has long been a curious contradiction. Included in the so-called Sacred 28, a registry compiled in the early 20th century to celebrate blood purity, the Weasleys were once regarded as aristocracy of sorts. And yet, unlike many of their counterparts, they became known not for wealth, power, or political ambition, but for something far more radical: kindness, conviction, and a defiant lack of prejudice. In a society where lineage was everything, the Weasleys dared to be different. Even as far back as the dark centuries of the Middle Ages, a time when hatred and resentment were the order of the day. Sympathetic to Muggleborns, welcoming to Muggles themselves, and openly critical of the darker ideologies that plagued their world, they drew the disdain of many so-called pure-blood elites. To those obsessed with status and bloodline, the Weasleys were, and are, something of a paradox. Pure of blood, but not of heart, at least by their narrow standards. Their surname, thought to be derived from the same root as weasel, has not helped their standing among the more superstitious corners of the magical world. In British Muggle folklore, the weasel is often considered an ill omen, cunning, unlucky, even cursed. Add to that a full head of flame-red hair, long believed to carry its own dark superstitions even among witches and wizards, and you begin to understand why some have looked down their noses at the Weasleys since ancient times. Long before the most famous generation of Weasleys took their first steps into the world, another name quietly earned its place in the family's storied history. Matilda Weasley, a sharp and remarkably gifted witch of the late 19th century, distinguished herself at Hogwarts for her skill in transfiguration and her uncanny ability to unravel even the most intricate of enchantments. Revered by teachers and peers alike, she would later serve the British Ministry of Magic as a curse breaker, traversing the globe to uncover forgotten relics and ancient hexes. Her exploits, though often overshadowed by those of later generations, left a quiet but enduring mark upon the family lore. By 1891, she had risen to the position of deputy headmistress at Hogwarts, serving under Phineas Nigellus Black. That year, her composure would be tested like never before, as the castle came under siege from within, a violent uprising led by the goblin Ranrock, who sought to unearth and wield Hogwarts' ancient, hidden magic. Matilda stood steadfast alongside her fellow professors, defending the school stone by stone. The cost was high. The loss of Professor Fig, a colleague and friend, cast a long shadow over the Great Hall. And yet, even in the wake of such sorrow, life at Hogwarts carried on, as it always has. By the following year, Matilda would meet the boy who would become her most brilliant pupil, a quietly intense young wizard named Albus Dumbledore. Though Matilda's deeds earned quiet admiration, the Weasleys' path through wizarding society would remain complex and often scrutinized, as the family's character, compassionate and principled, frequently set them at odds with the rigid traditions of their pure-blood peers. To families like the Malfoys or the Blacks, staunch defenders of ancestral lineage, the Weasleys were seen as traitors, pure by birth, yet tainted by sympathy. So deeply did some feel this perceived disgrace when Cedrella Black, daughter of that proud and ancient house, married Septimus Weasley. Second of three sisters, sorted into Slytherin House, but holding views diametrically opposed to those of her family, Cedrella chose love above all else. Her fate mirrors that of another young black woman from the following generation, Andromeda. Both were struck from the family tree altogether, their names scorched from the tapestry as though they had never existed. Yet from Cedrella and Septimus's love was born little Arthur, a red-haired boy, as clumsy as he was brimming with curiosity for the world. A man who would later be remembered by many as the father of the most brilliant generation of Weasleys the wizarding world has ever known. Arthur arrived at Hogwarts in the autumn of 1961, wide-eyed and eager, and was sorted, unsurprisingly for a Weasley, into Gryffindor House. There was nothing particularly grand or flashy about Arthur. He was not the loudest voice in the room nor the most daring on a broomstick, but there was something quietly determined in the way he carried himself. In his third year, in a decision that raised more than a few eyebrows among his peers, Arthur chose to take Muggle studies. It wasn't a popular choice, not at the time, but for Arthur, it was simple fascination. There was something enchanting about the way Muggles navigated a world entirely without magic, crafting their lives with ingenuity and perseverance. To Arthur, this was a kind of magic in itself, one worth understanding. It was during these formative school years that Arthur, almost always with his nose buried in books and inventions, began to spend time with a fellow Gryffindor who would, in time, come to define the rest of his life, Molly Prewett. Practically his opposite in many ways, she was spirited, sharp-witted, and carried a rebellious air about her. With her auburn hair and quick temper, she could quiet a room with a glance, and often did. As one might expect from a Prewett, herself a proud member of the Sacred 28, Molly had grown up in a lively wizarding household with two brothers, Fabian and Gideon. These young wizards were brilliant, but equally reckless and trouble-prone, sharing with their sister an inexhaustible joy, optimism, and a penchant for mischief. At first, Molly enjoyed teasing Arthur for his eccentric ways, but little by little, she found herself admiring the uniqueness of the boy, so many called odd. What began as fleeting glances and shared jokes soon blossomed into long evenings spent nestled in armchairs, whispering dreams about the world beyond the castle walls. And it could be said that the young Miss Prewett had a profound influence on that shy, bookish boy, helping him, little by little, to reveal the true Gryffindor spirit that had always lived quietly within him.
And the fat lady?
Said Bill.
She was here in my time.
Said Mrs. Weasley.
She gave me such a telling off one night when I got back to the dormitory at 4 in the morning.
What were you doing out of your dormitory at 4 in the morning?
Said Bill, surveying his mother with amazement. Mrs. Weasley grinned, her eyes twinkling. Not long after graduating from Hogwarts, Arthur and Molly married, a quiet, heartfelt union that stood in contrast to the darkening skies gathering over the wizarding world. The young couple moved into the Burrow, the ramshackle yet deeply charming Weasley family home, nestled on the outskirts of Ottery St. Catchpole. Crooked walls and misbehaving staircases gave the house a character all of its own, but it was Molly's warmth and Arthur's gentle humor that truly made it a home. It looked as though it had once been a large stone pig pen, but extra rooms had been added here and there until it was several stories high and so crooked it looked as though it were held up by magic, which, Harry reminded himself, it probably was. 4 or 5 chimneys were perched on top of the red roof. A lopsided sign stuck in the ground near the entrance read, "The Burrow." Around the front door lay a jumble of rubber boots and a very rusty cauldron. Several fat brown chickens were pecking their way around the yard.
Oh, for Merlin's sake, apologies for the unexpected interruption, but I simply have to spoil this news for you all. The Spellbook Chronicles family is finally growing. Are you ready for a new format on this channel?
Hi there, my name's Francesca Williams, and I've been hired by the Ministry of Magic to be a liaison between witches and wizards and muggles. I'm super excited to be representing the muggle community in this newfound friendship between our two worlds. I'll be bringing you news and updates from the Wizarding world, including some gossip, and my first video will be on the HBO series documenting the life and antics of Wizarding World hero, Mr. Harry Potter. Now, I'll be telling you everything I know so far, including casting and rumours. Look out for anything with the title Spell Buzz, as Spell Buzz relates directly to me. And, hang on, I best let you guys get going, as I've heard Quentin Pendragon doesn't really like to share the spotlight. Until next time, bye-bye now.
Their first child, William, Bill as he came to be known, was born on the 29th of November, 1970. Adventurous from a young age, with a quiet confidence and a taste for the unknown, he was the beginning of what would become one of the most beloved and boisterous wizarding families in Britain. Charlie arrived not long after, full of energy and an early fascination with magical creatures that never quite left him. Then came the meticulous and bright-eyed Percy, followed by the twins, Fred and George, who seemed to bring with them a permanent air of mischief and mayhem, even in infancy.
What are you plotting now?
After 5 sons, Molly, ever the determined woman, longed for a daughter. Yet when she tried again, she was gifted another boy, Ronald, a kind-hearted and quietly brave child, often overshadowed by the chaos of his older brothers, but destined to find strength in his own way. At last, she welcomed Ginevra, her long-awaited daughter, fiery, fearless, and with a natural talent for Quidditch that would rival any of her brothers. It was a time of joy and chaos in equal measure within the walls of the burrow, but outside, the world was changing. Lord Voldemort's rise to power plunged Wizarding Britain into a time of fear and uncertainty, a period that would later be remembered as the First Wizarding War. Though Arthur was employed at the Ministry, and Molly herself was never officially listed among the members of the Order of the Phoenix, a clandestine group founded by Albus Dumbledore to oppose the Death Eaters and the Dark Lord's rising forces. It was no mark against her courage. With a house full of small children and a husband often working late hours, her battleground was the home, where lullabies meant more than any shielding charm. Molly fought to preserve something just as vital, a sense of safety, of normalcy, of love within the storm. During the war, many witches and wizards sacrificed all they had for the cause of the Order of the Phoenix, placing their own lives and those of their loved ones in constant peril day after day. And among them were, of course, her 2 beloved brothers. Fabian was as powerful as he was impulsive and defiant. Gideon, calm and composed, a brilliant strategist and sharp-minded planner. Their actions, often unpredictable and carried out without the full approval of the Order, became a relentless thorn in the Dark Lord's side. And yet, it was their boldness that ultimately led them to a tragic fate. They fell in a Death Eater ambush, too violent and savage to be spoken of in full, even today. What truly matters, however, is the memory of their names and the ideals for which they fought. It is said that their sister honored her brothers by naming her twin sons with the same initials. F for Fabian, G for Gideon, Fred and George. 2 more mischief makers, blessed with extraordinary talent. With the fall of the Dark Lord and the miracle that surrounded young Harry Potter, the war, despite all its grief, its losses, and the silence it left behind, had finally come to an end. The Weasleys, resilient as ever, rolled up their sleeves and began to rebuild. And at the head of this new chapter stood their eldest, Bill. From the very start, Bill Weasley showed himself to be a remarkable young wizard. Sorted, naturally, into Gryffindor, he distinguished himself not just through bravery, but through an uncommon intellect and quiet determination. In his 3rd year, to the astonishment of many, he managed to take all 5 elective subjects. Muggle studies, care of magical creatures, divination, arithmancy, and study of ancient runes. Quite how he juggled such a punishing schedule remains a mystery, though some whispered that Professor Dumbledore may have permitted him the use of a time turner.
A time turn.
During his years at Hogwarts, Bill also became entangled in the shadows of the school's past, specifically the dark and dangerous mystery of the Cursed Vaults. Said to be 5 ancient chambers hidden deep within the castle, each one protected by a unique and formidable curse. The vaults were the stuff of rumor and fear. Some claimed they held treasures beyond imagination. Gold, lost prophecies, ancient artifacts of unspeakable power, while others believed they were prisons for magic, too dangerous to be known. Through it all, Bill's quiet excellence endured. He was named prefect in his 5th year and head boy by his 7th. And before leaving Hogwarts, he was awarded the prestigious Medal for Magical Merit, an honor that made it all the easier for him to secure a position with Gringotts Wizarding Bank, long coveted by the young Weasley. There, he joined the ranks of the Cursebreakers, a daring profession that combined magical expertise with the spirit of an adventurer. Operating more as treasure-hunting archaeologists than traditional bankers, Gringotts' Cursebreakers roamed the globe in search of ancient tombs, hidden vaults, and long-lost hoards, many of them sealed behind deadly enchantments, dark magic, or creatures long forgotten by time. It was dangerous work, to be sure, but for Bill, it was a calling. Part scholar, part explorer, and every bit the Gryffindor his family had always known him to be.
Dad'll go crazy over this.
Just 2 years younger than Bill, Charlie Weasley was cut from a rather different cloth, but no less remarkable for it. From an early age, the boy exhibited an intense fascination with magical creatures, dragons most of all. Family legend recalls a young Charlie attempting, with all the earnestness of childhood, to transform the family pets into dragons. Something tells me that Errol the Owl and Scabbers the Rat didn't quite enjoy that part. He began at Hogwarts on the 1st of September, 1984, and, like his siblings before and after, was sorted into Gryffindor. It didn't take long for Charlie to make his mark. By the end of his 2nd year, he had earned a place as Seeker on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. And by his 5th year, he was both team captain and a school prefect. With his natural leadership and uncanny affinity for flight, many believed Charlie could have gone on to play Quidditch professionally. Some even claimed he had the talent to join the national side. But glory on the pitch was never his ambition. In those years, like Bill, Charlie too found himself drawn into the shadows of one of Hogwarts' most dangerous secrets, the Cursed Vaults. Together with a group of fellow students, including his sharp-witted and spirited friend Nymphadora Tonks, he spent much of his school years trying to break the ancient curses that had haunted the castle for generations. They were difficult years, dark and often perilous, yet in the end, tranquility once more embraced the school. After leaving Hogwarts, he chose a path truer to his heart than any Quidditch Cup could offer. He traveled east to the dragon reserves of Romania. There, he would go on to become one of the finest dragon handlers of his generation, fearless, patient, and deeply respected among his peers. In 1992, Charlie received a rather peculiar letter from his youngest brother, Ron, requesting help with a dragon-related dilemma. As it turned out, Rubeus Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper and a longtime friend of Charlie's, had come into possession of a Norwegian ridgeback, illegally, and from a rather suspicious character later revealed to be none other than Professor Quirrell, acting under the influence of the Dark Lord himself. Recognizing the danger, not only to Hagrid, but to the creature as well, Charlie arranged for a discreet midnight extraction. The baby dragon, named Norbert, was quietly transported to the sanctuary in Romania, far from the scheming shadows that had begun to creep once again through the wizarding world. As for the rest, well, that tale has long since been told. Nearly a decade younger than Charlie, Percy Ignatius Weasley arrived in a very different chapter of the family's story. With the war over and the wizarding world cautiously rebuilding itself, Percy entered life under far more stable skies, though no less eager to make his own mark upon them. From his earliest years, Percy was the embodiment of order and ambition, meticulous, rule-abiding, and hopelessly enamored with notions of prestige and success. He viewed the world not through flights of fancy or dreams of dragons, but through the sharp lens of structure and protocol.
Interesting.
While Bill had been bold and Charlie wild-hearted, Percy was determined to rise. He began at Hogwarts on the 1st of September, 1987, and, unsurprisingly, was sorted into Gryffindor, though more for his drive and conviction than any fondness for breaking rules. He shared a dormitory with the steadfast Oliver Wood and brought with him the family rat, Scabbers, blissfully unaware that the pet he'd inherited was, in truth, the animagus and fugitive Peter Pettigrew. Academically gifted and methodical, Percy quickly distinguished himself among his peers. He was made prefect in his 5th year, much to the pride of his parents, who rewarded him with brand new robes and a screech owl he named Hermes. Not long after, Percy began quietly dating Penelope Clearwater, a fellow prefect from Ravenclaw, though he worked hard to keep the relationship secret from his siblings, for fear that Fred and George would turn his romantic ventures into a source of unrelenting torment. It was during this time that the Chamber of Secrets was opened, plunging the school into fear and suspicion. When Penelope, a Muggle-born, was later petrified by the monster within the chamber, Percy was shaken. Though he rarely wore his emotions, his quiet devastation was visible to anyone who knew where to look. That devastation reached its lowest point when, not long afterwards, his little first-year sister, Ginny, was taken by the heir of Slytherin.
She won't wait.
But the story of the Chamber of Secrets, fortunately, ended well.
Did you know that exclusive Spellbook Chronicles booklets are now available? Ancient volumes filled with secrets just like the ones hidden in the restricted section. But instead of hiding from Madame Pince, all you need is a click. This Muggle technology is amazing. Each booklet contains one of the most beloved stories from the series, enriched with exclusive images. So, what are you waiting for? Start collecting them all. Your support is invaluable. Not only will you enjoy the magic, but you'll also be supporting the channel, allowing us to keep bringing you the most amazing stories, like the one in this episode. So, enjoy the show.
As the years passed, the prefect became head boy, and Percy graduated from Hogwarts with top marks in all his newts, already setting his sights on the corridors of power at the Ministry of Magic. Soon after, he was appointed to the Department of International Magical Cooperation under Bartemius Crouch Sr. There, his star continued to rise. However, following the tragic events of the Triwizard Tournament, the death of Crouch, the return of the Dark Lord, and the ensuing chaos, Percy found himself caught in the widening rift between the Ministry and those who sided with Dumbledore and Harry Potter. And here, Percy made his choice. He gained the trust of senior officials and, in time, was promoted to serve as personal assistant to the Minister for Magic himself, Cornelius Fudge. When he dismissed the Dark Lord's return as a fabrication, Percy did not hesitate to align himself with his superiors. He expected his family to be proud. Instead, he was met with disappointment and fury. A bitter confrontation with his father ended with Percy storming out of the burrow, accusing Arthur of lacking ambition and of holding the family back. That very night, he packed his things and left. He cut ties with all of them. His mother, heartbroken, came to London to plead with him. He shut the door in her face.
Go away.
And so, while the Order of the Phoenix quietly reassembled to face the gathering storm, Percy stood apart, alone in a modest flat in London, loyal to the Ministry and convinced he was doing the right thing. Fred and George Weasley were, quite simply, chaos incarnate, with ginger hair and matching grins. From the moment they learned to walk, and more critically to run, the Burrow had not known a quiet day. Their bedroom was a battlefield of bangs, bursts, and bubbling concoctions. Explosions were not occasional. They were expected. Molly Weasley loved them, of course, but she also very nearly lost her mind raising them. Naturally, they were both sorted into Gryffindor, where they immediately made a name for themselves. By their 2nd year, they'd secured positions as beaters for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, wielding their clean sweep fives with frightening precision. Their style was described, with great accuracy, as like playing with 2 human bludgers. They were adored by their peers and treated like minor celebrities in their house. The twins' true moment of destiny, however, came when they snatched a tattered bit of magical parchment from Filch's office. The Marauder's map. It was love at first incantation. No one can truly say how the two managed to uncover its prodigious secrets, since one needs the password I solemnly swear that I am up to no good to activate it, and mischief managed to conceal it again. There are many theories on the matter, and perhaps the truth will never be known. Yet the most credited explanation is that the very magic infused within the map recognized in Fred and George the same spirit as its original creators, the Marauders. The same rebellious streak, the same courage, the same urge to bend the rules, and to remind everyone that, in the end, having a laugh is what truly matters. With that in hand, and their boundless imagination, Fred and George turned Hogwarts into their personal playground. Though they excelled in pranks, few acknowledged just how bright they truly were. Despite their antics, both boys received strong marks during their early Hogwarts years, but as their joke inventions grew more elaborate, their priorities shifted. They began testing their prototypes in secret. Canary creams, fainting fancies, nosebleed nougats, all in preparation for something far bigger than anyone guessed. Their network of friends was wide. Lee Jordan was practically a third twin, and the Gryffindor Quidditch team, Angelina Johnson, Alicia Spinett, Katie Bell, Oliver Wood, formed a loyal circle that knew them well. Even Hermione Granger, though often at odds with their ethics, eventually came to respect their ingenuity. In their final year at Hogwarts, things took a darker turn. With Dolores Umbridge as High Inquisitor and Dumbledore driven out, Hogwarts became a place of surveillance and fear. When Umbridge banned them from Quidditch, after an altercation with Draco Malfoy, they responded with fireworks. Literal ones.
Fireworks?
Their pièce de résistance was legendary.
Fireworks?
During the Easter holidays, they calmly packed up, dropped out, and flew off into the sky after unleashing their Weasley's wildfire whiz-bangs in a dazzling display of defiance. It wasn't just rebellion, it was performance art. Their portable swamp was so elegantly conjured that Professor Flitwick preserved a section of it as a fine example of magical innovation. Initially, their dreams of opening a joke shop had been a sore point with their mother, who feared her boys were wasting their potential. But Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, 93 Diagon Alley, changed everything. The shop became one of the most popular locations in the wizarding world, its windows bursting with color, laughter, and magical mayhem. Their mail order business had become a juggernaut. They even spoke of buying Zonko's, the legendary Hogsmeade joke shop, after it closed down. But when war returned to the wizarding world, the laughter dimmed, but did not vanish. Fred and George joined the Order of the Phoenix, following in the footsteps of Bill and Charlie. Their humor remained, but sharpened with purpose. They were no longer simply tricksters. They were defenders of light, of joy, of rebellion. And in the darkest of times, they reminded all who knew them that sometimes laughter is the greatest form of resistance. Ronald Bilious Weasley was born on the 1st of March, 1980, into a world already trembling beneath the shadow of the Dark Lord. Growing up the youngest of 6 boisterous brothers was no small trial. Fred and George, in particular, found endless amusement in tormenting their little brother, turning his teddy bear into a spider, a cruel joke that planted the seeds of a lifelong arachnophobia, tricking him with enchanted sweets, and once, even attempting to bind him in an unbreakable vow, until Arthur's fury put an abrupt end to their mischief. To be a Weasley meant learning resilience. For Ron, it meant finding his voice amid the chaos. As a child, his constant companion was Scabbers, a lazy, rather shabby rat he had inherited from Percy. When, in September 1991, Ron boarded the Hogwarts Express for the first time, he did so with a mixture of excitement and dread. He feared that, after 5 elder brothers, who had all excelled in their own ways, he would fail to live up to the Weasley name. Yet fate had other plans. In a chance meeting aboard that train, he sat down opposite a bespectacled boy with a lightning-shaped scarf, Harry Potter. What began with a chocolate frog and a nervous laugh soon became a friendship that would change not only Ron's life, but the course of the entire wizarding world.
I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. You could say I got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was head boy and Charlie was captain of Quidditch. Now Percy's a prefect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal, because they did it first.
At Hogwarts, Ron was sorted, unsurprisingly, into Gryffindor. But his courage was not loud or ostentatious. Rather, it revealed itself in moments of quiet loyalty, when standing by his friends meant everything. Alongside Harry and Hermione Granger, at first dismissed by Ron as a nightmare, only to become one of his dearest companions, he embarked on adventure after adventure. The Philosopher's Stone, the Chamber of Secrets, the rescue of Sirius Black, the defense of Buckbeak. Wherever danger lay, Ron was there, often grumbling, often doubting himself, but never truly faltering when it mattered most. The revelation that his pet rat, Scabbers, was in truth Peter Pettigrew, a traitor long thought dead, and the very man who had betrayed Harry's parents to Voldemort, shook Ron to his core. That his childhood companion had been the architect of so much grief was a bitter wound, one that deepened his resolve never to stand idly by in the face of darkness.
I'm doing it.
By his 5th year, with Lord Voldemort returned and the Ministry in denial, Ron joined Dumbledore's Army, a secret student organization that defied tyranny within the very walls of Hogwarts. In the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, he fought with desperate courage, proving himself not only as Harry's steadfast friend, but as a fighter in his own right. In the dark days that followed, Ron's insecurities often clashed with his loyalty, yet time and again he found the strength to rise above them. Nowhere was this clearer than in the trio's final quest, the hunt for Horcruxes. When faced with the cursed locket of Salazar Slytherin, it was Ron, often the one who felt least, who proved greatest. Summoning the sword of Godric Gryffindor itself, he destroyed the foul artifact, overcoming both the enchantment's venomous whispers and his own deepest fears. If Harry was the chosen one, Ron was proof that heroism does not lie in destiny, but in choice. He was the boy forever overshadowed, yet he grew into the man who stood shoulder to shoulder with legends. Brave, flawed, loyal to a fault, Ronald Bilious Weasley became not only Harry Potter's truest friend, but one of the most quietly indispensable figures in the fall of the Dark Lord. Ginevra Molly Weasley, better known to all as simply Ginny, was born on the 11th of August, 1981, the last of Arthur and Molly's 7 children, and the first daughter born into the Weasley line for generations. After 6 sons, Molly's long-cherished wish for a daughter was finally fulfilled. Yet Ginny was never destined to live in anyone's shadow. From her earliest years, Ginny displayed a fiery independence that set her apart. With 6 older brothers absorbed in endless Quidditch matches, she was forbidden from joining in. But Ginny was not one to be deterred. At just 6 years old, she began sneaking into the family broom shed, secretly flying each of her brothers' brooms in turn. For years, no one suspected a thing, until Hermione Granger, with her usual sharpness, revealed the truth to Fred and George years later. Even before her own letter from Hogwarts arrived, Ginny longed for the castle's enchanted corridors. She claimed she had wanted to go since the day Bill first set foot in its halls, though, at the time, she was barely a year old. Exaggeration, perhaps, but the sentiment spoke volumes. Ginny was a Weasley through and through, bold and eager to carve her place in the world. She was only 10 when she stood on platform 9 3/4 beside her mother, watching her brothers board the train in September 1991. It was there she first caught sight of Harry Potter. Too young to join him, yet utterly captivated, she pleaded with Molly to let her board the train. Her mother refused, but the impression had been made, and Ginny's childhood admiration soon blossomed into something deeper. When Ginny arrived at Hogwarts the following year, she was sorted into Gryffindor, like all the Weasleys before her. Bright, spirited, and determined, she should have been stepping into a new life, filled with excitement and promise. Instead, she fell prey to one of the darkest artifacts in wizarding history, Tom Riddle's diary. To Ginny, the diary seemed a confidant, a friend. She poured into it her heart's secret fears, the sting of her brother's teasing, the embarrassment of second-hand robes and books, the hopelessness of her feelings for Harry Potter. Yet each word she wrote fed the shadow within the pages. By Halloween, the memory of Tom Riddle had grown strong enough to possess her, forcing open the Chamber of Secrets and unleashing the basilisk upon Hogwarts. Slowly, Ginny's life force was drained, until she lay unconscious in the chamber, her very soul slipping away. It was Harry who saved her, destroying the diary with a basilisk fang, and restoring Ginny's vitality. Though shaken and traumatized, she returned to school with quiet resilience, her strength of spirit soon reasserting itself. If anything, the ordeal forged her courage into steel. As the years passed, Ginny grew into a formidable witch, bright in her studies, sharp of tongue, and possessed of a wit that rivaled even Fred and George's. On the Quidditch pitch, she proved herself a natural. By her 4th year, she had earned a place as chaser for the Gryffindor team, and when circumstances demanded it, she flew as seeker in Harry's place. Though she modestly admitted he was better, her skill and daring quickly silenced any doubters.
Lovely shade of pink.
Like her brothers before her, Ginny stood firm against tyranny. She joined Dumbledore's army in her 4th year, dueling bravely beneath the watchful eyes of Dolores Umbridge's regime. In the final year, as the Death Eaters tightened their grip on Hogwarts, she became one of the school's most defiant rebels, leading resistance within the castle walls, even when Harry, Ron, and Hermione were absent. And when the Battle of Hogwarts erupted, Ginny was there. She fought not as the youngest Weasley, nor as Harry Potter's companion, but as her own person, fierce, unflinching, and courageous to the last. By the war's end, Ginny had become more than the fiery little sister who once trailed behind her brothers. She was a warrior in her own right, one of the brightest witches of her generation, and a living embodiment of the courage that had defined her family for centuries. In the years that followed the fall of Voldemort, the Weasley family endured both grief and renewal, their story a mirror of the wizarding world's slow return to peace. Bill Weasley, once cursed and scarred by Fenrir Greyback during the war, did not allow his injuries to overshadow his life. He had fallen in love with Fleur Delacour, the Beauxbaton champion whose courage and loyalty had proven themselves long before the battle was won. Despite their wedding being marred by Death Eater's intrusion in 1997, their bond remained unshaken. After the war, they settled at Shell Cottage, a quiet refuge on the windswept coast, where they built a family together. Their children, Victoire, Dominique, and Louis Weasley, would grow up under the sound of the sea in a home touched by both French elegance and Weasley warmth. Charlie Weasley, ever faithful to dragons and the untamed wild, never sought a marriage or children of his own. During the war, he had worked from Romania, rallying foreign allies to the Order's cause. After peace returned, he simply continued his life's passion, the study of dragons, content to be the beloved uncle to a host of Weasley nieces and nephews. Percy Weasley faced one of the hardest journeys of reconciliation. Estranged from his family during Voldemort's rise, his absence at Bill and Fleur's wedding had broken his mother's heart. Yet when the final hour came, Percy returned to Hogwarts and stood beside his siblings. He begged their forgiveness, and though grief would soon strike them all, that reunion stood as a healing moment. After the war, Percy dedicated himself anew to the Ministry of Magic. Under the leadership of Kingsley Shacklebolt, he rose to become head of the Department of Magical Transportation, finding redemption in service and restoring honor to his name. The tale of Fred and George Weasley remains the family's deepest wound. Both had fought bravely in the skies above Privet Drive, and later at the Battle of Hogwarts, where they stood shoulder to shoulder defending the castle's secret passages. It was there, amidst the thunder of curses and collapsing stone, that Fred Weasley was killed in a sudden explosion. His laughter, so often the heartbeat of the family, was silenced in an instant. George, though he carried on, was never the same. In time, he married Angelina Johnson, and together they raised 2 children, Fred, named in honor of his fallen twin, and Roxanne. George kept alive the legacy he and Fred had built, running Weasley's Wizard Wheezes in Diagon Alley, a place where mischief and joy endured, even in the shadow of loss. Ron Weasley did not return to Hogwarts to complete a 7th year. Instead, he stepped directly into the rebuilding of their shattered world. Alongside Harry Potter, he joined the Auror Office, helping to track down and bring justice to those who had fled or hidden their allegiance to Voldemort. 2 years later, he chose a different path, joining George at the joke shop, ensuring that laughter remained part of their family's legacy. Ron later married Hermione Granger, his companion through war and friendship alike, and together they had 2 children, Rose and Hugo. To Ron, being immortalized on a chocolate frog card was his finest hour, though his truest pride lay in family and the future they had built. Ginny Weasley, the youngest of the clan, found her own light in the aftermath. Rekindling her love with Harry Potter, she went on to play as a chaser for the Holyhead Harpies, living the dream of her Hogwarts years. She and Harry later married, raising 3 children, James Sirius, Albus Severus, and Lily Luna, and in time, Ginny took her place as senior Quidditch correspondent for the Daily Prophet. Fierce, bold, and unyielding, she remained every bit the fiery heart of the Weasley family. Through joy and heartbreak, through the loss of Fred, and the births of new generations, the Weasleys endured. Their red-haired line, once mocked by some as poor and numerous, had proven to be among the bravest in wizarding history. In every battle, every sacrifice, and every new beginning, the Weasleys embodied what was strongest in the wizarding world: love, loyalty, and the courage to face the dark and still laugh.
And so, my dear friends, our journey comes to an end for today. Ah, the Weasleys. Without them, the wizarding world would certainly be a bit duller. Sometimes I still think about that question old Arthur asked me so many years ago. A question I must admit I've never been able to answer. But perhaps you, Muggle listeners, can help me out. What exactly is the function of a rubber duck? Until next time, my dear adventurers, I'll be waiting for you right here, as always, in the next spellbinding episode of the Spellbook Chronicles.